Joining us today are three powerhouse speakers. We have Annette Shun Wah, who is a writer, broadcaster, producer, theatre maker, and artistic director. She's currently the executive producer of Contemporary Asian Australian Performance and the newly appointed artistic director of Australia Festival in South Australia. So I wish her a warm congratulations for your appointment. We will also hear from Arahmaiani, an esteemed contemporary artist and activist in Indonesia working in performance, painting, drawing, installation, video, poetry, dance and music, and more, I'm sure. Her work has been showcased in many international exhibitions and festivals. For the last 10 years, Rani has worked with grassroots communities in the Tibetan plateau addressing serious environmental issues in the region. And she has also recently initiated a community-based art project in Bali called Pertama. And last but not least, the inimitable Rani Pramesti. Rani is an independent storyteller and facilitator, intercultural producer, and advocate for a more just and equitable arts sector. She is program producer at Theatre Network Australia, where she facilitates the Victorian Independent Producers Initiative, and she's the founder and a co-facilitator at Creatives of Colour. Now, I'm going to shut up in a moment so that we can get started, and if we do go over time, I apologise, but I would just like to quickly mention that this talk tonight is the first of our CAUSINDY online series, and there will be another number of panels in the months to come. I'd recommend you find us on social media for more info about those. Also, I will just let you know to all of the audience, this talk will be recorded and uploaded in video and podcast form, so stay tuned for that. And if you enjoyed the talk, you might want to share those links around with friends. And lastly, just a bit about the structure. We'll begin with a discussion between the three panelists. However, if you have questions as we go along, please feel more than welcome to write them down and submit them in the appropriate chat area of Zoom. We'll have a Q&A towards the end and hopefully answer all of those questions. If you're more comfortable asking a question in Bahasa Indonesia, you're more than welcome to, and we will translate it for the panel. Kalau mau tanya dalam bahasa Indonesia, nggak apa-apa, nanti diterjemahkan. Jangan malu-malu. Okay, so I reckon we should dive straight in. So I think we might start off the conversation just setting the context a little bit, talking about the impacts of COVID-19 on arts communities. So yeah, Rani, we might start off with you as somebody who facilitates a grassroots space for artists to connect and share stories and upskill, of course. I'm sure you have some interesting perspectives.
Thanks, Mira. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. I actually wasn't expecting for you to start with me, so I was like, firstly, I also want to acknowledge the country that I'm on. I'll do it in Bahasa Indonesia, actually. So, pertama-tama saya ingin mengutarakan rasa hormat saya kepada penduduk asli negeri ini, terutama di mana saya berada, ini kebangsaan Kulin. And yeah, so I just want to do that. And a bit of context in terms of the work that I do. So I wear several hats. One of them as the program producer at Theatre Network Australia actually gives me a bit of insight into the performing arts sector more broadly. Because we, Theatre Network Australia, we do many things. But we are very focused on supporting the independent performing arts in Australia, as well as small to medium arts organizations in Australia working in performing arts. A lot of our activities has to do with like gathering people across the sector that may not otherwise have the opportunity to come together. So Theatre Network Australia, produces the Australian Theatre Forum, which obviously cannot happen at the moment in the way that it normally does. We also do a lot of advocacy, which is based on research. So we often consult with the sector and ask the sector what is the most pressing and urgent issues that we need to be aware of. And then we advocate downwards into the community, but also in terms of capacity building. But then we also advocate upwards into state and federal government. And that work is very much led, we're a small team of 5 actually, so we're a small but mighty team. we also do very specific capacity building projects. So the program that I manage, for example, is the Victorian Independent Producers Initiative, which is a project delivered in partnership with Creative Victoria, which is the state funding body for the arts in Victoria, the province that I'm in, the state that I'm in now. Yeah, so that's kind of with my TNA hat, I get to kind of see, have a bit of an insight, I suppose, into performing arts in Australia. And then the grassroots initiative that Mira mentioned, so I'm a co-facilitator of the Creatives of Color project. And I noticed my co-facilitator, Kobang Rosie Kleins, is here, so shout out Rosie. And that project came out of basically back-to-back experiences of how challenging it is navigating the art sector as a person of color, as someone who's not white. And I had a series of really challenging experiences, especially last year, you know, I don't know, it was just back to back. And eventually I was just like, one of the experiences was actually when I was part of a startup program, learning different research methods that startups use in their work. But we were doing research into Indonesian international student experiences in Melbourne, but we found that that work kept getting derailed because of, to put it bluntly, because of white ignorance. And so we changed tactic and started the Creatives of Color project, which involved researching and interviewing. We've done 60 interviews with creative people of color in terms of the challenges that they face navigating a predominantly white art sector. In terms of COVID, so thanks for bearing with me whilst I give all that context, because I'm aware I don't know a lot of the names in the participants, so you know, just need to give a bit of context. In terms of COVID, it's been devastating across the board. So the latest tally, if people want to follow, there's a website called ilostmygig.net.au, which gives a rough tally of, you know, how much income people have lost since the COVID-19 shutdowns. The latest tally, which actually hasn't been updated recently, so it was updated in late April, was $340 million has been lost. I'm sure it's more since then because that was 2 months ago. What the parts of the sector that has been really vulnerable, obviously, has been the independent sector and small to medium arts organizations, because these are the sectors that feel the most any funding cuts to government arts funding in Australia. And then on top of that, there's the COVID-19 challenges. With Creatives of Color, because we work specifically for, with, and by with First Nations and people of color, there's additional challenges that we've been hearing from the people that we've been working with. So if people live with disability, for example, this time during COVID-19 shutdowns has been very much focused on survival, because, you know, there's, as people know, there's been panic buying, including panic buying of things like medication and panic buying of things like hand sanitizer. And disproportionately, of course, that impacts people living with disability, you know, who may already have immunocompromised, you know, bodies, and who might be caring for other people. It's been like extra levels of stress is what we've been hearing from the community. And then, of course, this past week or so, with the Black Lives Matter and the police killings and brutality in the US, we've also been hearing about how that's been another layer of, you know, challenges and stress. And so we always try and respond to what the community's most urgent needs are through Creatives of Color. So for example, inshallah, in June and July, a lot of our programming is actually going to be led by Black folks in response to what's happening, which in response to what's always happening, actually, but there's more attention on it at the moment. I feel like I've talked enough. Is that, yeah? Enough of an intro?
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. And thank you for adding to your introduction as well. That was
That's
great.
all good.
Buyani, maybe we'll turn to you now and hear a bit about life in Indonesia at the moment.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. In Indonesia, okay, it's a bit confusing, to be honest. because the most people, they don't really know, of course, what is COVID-19 means, although of course there are people already seen, some people getting really sick, even die, right? But the government, the problem is they don't really explain this phenomena in a scientific way. Yeah, that's one thing. And then their kind of policy changing from time to time. So it's make people confused. I'm just talking honestly, yeah, about what I have witnessing so far. Even myself, sometimes I got confused with the kind of policy that the government made and changing from time to time. Yeah. So, but okay, that's our reality. But of course, we also understood that we have to do something, And I have been, my practice, I have been working with community here in Bali, but of course also in Yogyakarta already for a long time. Yeah, usually I'm working with community of artists or also activists and also Islamic boarding school, but also the non-Muslim groups as well, like the Catholic, the Buddhists, the Hindus. I mean, I'm working with all kind of, groups. Yeah. So this is, although when, yeah, I told you about the situation about how the government is dealing with this problem. It's a bit worrying, but when I see how the community is operating, it gives really sense of hope, And also the positive kind of idea start to develop, yeah, because we know that we are not alone. We can do something with our groups, our friends, our community, right? So then ID study to, develop, yeah. For example, in Jogja, this is example of how some people, a lot of people lost their jobs, meaning that they don't have income anymore, meaning also they have trouble in getting food. Okay, government supposed to provide some food, but there's a lot of problem in regards to this operation. Some people don't really get it. The people who really need it, they don't really get it. But people who doesn't really need it, they get it, for example. Yeah, or some people found out that this food is becoming rotten somewhere. They don't really give it to the people who needs it. So this is very difficult situation, right? For those who are really needing the food. So, but luckily, for example, there are people, the communities in Jogja as well as in Bali, who could organize things and then provide for food for those who need it, And this is so far working well. But of course, when we think about this situation in a longer kind of term, then we really have to think about how can we have the support. So far, it's just supported by the people, okay? And but if it is like ongoing for a long time, of course, there will be also more and more people lost their jobs and can't really help, right? And I don't know, maybe some people becoming sick, and also the situation of people who are sick before, although recently I heard that the government is going to provide medicine and help for free, but before it was nothing like that. But this is also something that we need to see and prove it,
Yeah,
To
yeah,
say that, not that I'm not I don't believe in the government. It's not like that. But you know what happened, because the practice of corruption here is a common thing. Even if government already like given something, but on the way, you know, the things has to get to the people. Somewhere it is like changing, some disappearing, for example. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Absolutely. Yeah, and the things that you mentioned about the ways in which the community, more than anything, rallies to adapt to all of the incredible challenges being faced at the moment, it's extremely pertinent. It sort of brings us into our next topic of discussion, which is more about that sort of adaptation more broadly, but I suppose particularly in the arts community. Annette, I might give you the space now to discuss the ways in which those in the arts industry, particularly, I suppose, are finding unique ways to adapt.
Yeah, thank you, Mira. Hello from Camaragal country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners from where I live and work at the moment. Don't usually work here in my home, but that's what many of us are doing right now. I think in Australia and Indonesia, even though we're at different stages of this pandemic at the moment, we sort of feel like we're starting to come through it and starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But even so, for all of us, it's been a time of great loss of employment and opportunity and momentum. Works and artists who are developing new ideas there's just been a stop to it. So many projects and tours and performances have been cancelled. So it's really put a full stop on things, which has been really devastating for many of us, but it is also perhaps presents an opportunity to stop and rethink the way we've been doing things and the way we've been approaching our work and our artistic practices. We've been forced to adapt. I mean, as the executive producer of CARP, Contemporary Asian Australian Performance, we've pretty much lost all the things we were going to do for the rest of the year. With the exception of a thing we have called the Longhouse, which is our sort of Asian Australian community building platform. We have 2 or 3 events a year where we all get into a room together, we learn something together, and we just hang out together. We get to have a few drinks. And for artists in Australia of Asian background, it's quite often very a rare opportunity to be in a room full of other Asian Australian artists. And that in itself has been really empowering for many, many people to form new connections, find collaborators, just to get some moral support from people who have had a similar circumstances and understand what they're going through. So we haven't been able to do that, but we have been able to turn that into an online platform. And the beauty of that is, like this, we're able to connect not only outside of Sydney, where we usually do this, but around Australia and even internationally if we wish to. So that's one of the ways we're adapting that particular program. With Ausasia Festival, which I've only just joined, that festival runs in October, November every year, usually the last 2 weeks of October into November. And it's an international festival which focuses on the engagement of Australia and Asia. Now, until now, the focus has been on showcasing really exciting work from Asia, which is really great, and supporting collaboration between Asian and Australian artists. So with the travel restrictions, that makes it very difficult. This year, with the uncertainty, with social gathering and all of those sorts of things, it's just impossible to present that scale of festival in October this year. So we instead will be doing a small series of online talks, a little bit like this, but focusing on the engagement between Australia and Asia, how it's going to be shifting pre and post-pandemic, and how artists respond to that. So that's roughly the theme of those talks And the first festival will be in October 2021. But even then, I don't know when we're going to be able to travel internationally. So for me to go and see works, let alone to organise artists to come to Australia, is going to be a difficult thing. So I think it will require new ways of thinking about how to present and how to look at work. One of the things that I really want to do with the festival, though, if it is about the engagement of Australia and Asia, then the people who embody that engagement are Asian Australians who are already here. They don't have to come from overseas. So happily, my wish to do that just coincides with some of the travel restrictions we're going to be dealing with. So in a way that's not really an adaptation, it's just a coincidence that it will work out a little bit better for us, and that we have a stronger representation of Australian artists and works. But I think the interesting thing for me in programming this is, you know, normally festival directors and venue operators, they just go overseas, you know, they hop on a plane, you hop on a bus, and then they go on a shopping trip. And they'll go, oh yes, you know, you're an interesting artist, I one of those, and dance work here, and a bit of something else there, and there's my festival. And that's it. And then you come and you do your show, and then you go home, and that's it. And I don't think that's a very satisfying relationship. And I think that what we really need to be looking at as presenters and as artists is developing longer term relationships, so that programmers come to understand their artists and work together over a long period of time towards an outcome which might be them participating in the festival. But I think it's much more satisfying and a deeper engagement if that is about a relationship rather than a shopping trip.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, that sounds really fantastic, Annette. I'm sure I can speak for everyone when I say I'm really excited to see how all of this plays out over the next couple of years.
Thank you, me too.
Yeah. I'd like to go a little bit more in depth now into sort of the really broad-reaching role of art in these difficult times like we're looking at the moment. Of course, currently we're not only facing a global pandemic, but also critical and overdue upheaval and a call to arms to address systemic racism around the world. I would like to go into some of your own experiences about the role of art in times of crisis. These could be historic experiences. They don't have to be a response to what's happening currently, but just all the things that feed into that idea of sort of fostering resilience. And Buyani, maybe I'll throw this one to you again to start us off, and then we'll hear from Rani and Annette as well. That your art and activism has addressed such a range of challenges in the world, from natural disasters, discrimination and violence against women, hardline religious groups.
Yeah, I would like to maybe share a little bit of my experience in how I sort of reinterpreting the meaning of art activity, because in my practice, art practice and activism is becoming like blur. Yeah, there's no such border. I mix everything up basically. But this is my approach, because in my concept, for me, art and life is inseparable. Yeah, it's connected. So that's why maybe I'm using various kind of medium in my practice, but also I'm also doing the practical side of it, like working with the community, dealing with environmental issues, you know, or social issues or cultural issues, and find alternative, creative solution for the problems of the community that they have to deal with. Yeah. So then my practice is not just about expressing things in art form, like formal art form, but also on the other kind of expression, mode of expression, right? Like practical kind of solution of the problem. And I've been doing this, yeah, in Indonesia, of course, in Java and in Bali, but also I've been doing this also abroad. In Tibet, for example, I've been doing this for last 10 years. And in Germany, I've been doing this for last 8 years at least. And then there's some also work I have been doing starting last year in Canada. I'm supposed to work with indigenous group there. Actually, I'm supposed to go there in August, working with indigenous group in Victoria Island. But yeah, of course, now it has been postponed till next year. And then I was also in Melbourne last year on residencyship with the VCA for 1 month. And actually, yeah, the plan is also to work with the community in Melbourne. And I also got informed that VCA is planning to have to open a studio and an office in Yogyakarta. Yeah, because they also, in a way, can see that the kind of exchange and also community activity among artists and activists in Melbourne and in Yogyakarta would become something really, really important in the future. And now, of course, with this kind of situation, it's like, yes, that's right, you know, this is what we need. Yeah. Okay, and then also in New York, also I have already group of friends there, and they also would like to do a long-term. Now, Annette is talking about long-term kind of, you know, collaboration. And this is, I agree with her, this kind of activity will become, you know, something that people will really appreciate, because this will be a serious and deeper kind of activity that gives people opportunity also to explore more their creativities. And it's not just limited to only like a few artists, but artists will share this also with the, you know, with the audience, with the community. And this is very important, because in this kind of situation, as we can see now how, you know, the economic situation is like falling down, and it's gonna be, we're going to deal with the crisis, and even maybe the impact of this serious economic crisis is the food crisis, for example. And you can imagine what is happening in country like Indonesia. Yeah, maybe you know that most of food in this country is actually imported from Thailand or Vietnam, for example. You know, but now in this kind of situation, the Thai people or the Vietnamese, they will, oh no, we're not going to send our food anywhere else. We want to keep it for ourselves. Yeah, we need to store it. So this is one example of the problem. But I think if we can have the kind of network, yeah, and we can help each other, support each other. This is really needed today. Actually, just for your information, there is now also the network. I mean, I have been working with a group of activists in Japan, and they helped one of the project in Tibet as well, the so-called Yak Bank. And now there are groups from China who also wants to do community-based kind of so-called art project, yeah? And they actually invite me actually to give a speech into 26th of June. And yeah, they would like to learn something from my experience working with the community. So this is what is happening now in our neighboring country. And China is a huge, you know, and will be a very influential kind of country in the future, right?
Yeah.
But now they really try to also find a way, how can people, you know, being empowered to deal with this situation.
Absolutely. And I remember in one of our earlier conversations, you were saying that, of course, you began your work in the Tibetan Plateau as a result of serious environmental disasters that occurred there. And it took about 5 years, for about 5 years, you were doing grassroots work with the community without any support whatsoever from China.
Yeah.
And that was, of course, such a long-term valuable investment from you that did eventually see that additional support.
Yeah, and actually in the last 3 years, I've been working with a team from IPB, Institute Pertanian Bogor, and then from Atmajaya in Yogyakarta, and also team from the university I'm teaching in Germany, from Passau. And we've been supporting and helping organic farmers in Jogja and in West Java. And this project is going well. And we try to convince also the government, especially the local government, to support these organic farmers, because they are like the will be hope for the future, really, and not only for farmers, it's for everyone. Because we know that the COVID is coming from the problem of environment, basically, for example. Yeah. And then if we don't care about this, you can imagine what is going to happen in the future.
Yeah, that's absolutely so completely true. Yeah. Rani, I might handball to you now. Art, activism, crises.
I just want to say that I really appreciate the points that Bu Yani talked about, and they've been really present in the conversations I have with my family in Indonesia too, Bu Yani. And because I have family spread across different parts, including in villages up in Toraja, and my mom and I have been talking about what does the urgent need for food sovereignty, especially like my mom made it back to the village, which is my stepfather is Torajanese. Anyway, she made it back to the village 2 days before things started getting shut down, and then it became really obvious that the first concern was, oh my God, how are we going to get food? Everything is shipped from Java, and that's why everything is much more expensive when you're outside of Java, because it's, additional transport costs, shipping, trucks, planes, all that stuff. So I think food sovereignty is really urgent. In terms of your question, the role of art in times of crisis, Mira, what came to my mind straight away is like, I'll be very personal actually, because I found that art has been a way to help me to be present with my body during this time. And art has been a way to support my mental health during this time. One of the, when the shutdown started happening in Melbourne, we moved out of our studio space in Collingwood Yards, Creatives of Colour studio space, and we moved everything online. And we trialed for the first time a creative exploration and healing workshop with art therapist Reham Hakim just a couple of weekends ago. It was very interesting because Reham sent all the participants packages of clay, and then we all linked up on Zoom, but we were all playing with clay, like just, like kneading it and like, forming things from it in our own homes. And then Reham got us to share with each other on Zoom. And a lot of the participants were saying how it was, and myself included, that one of the benefits of that was how like we were able to be still, like we were able to be still because we had this like new sensorial experience that we were exploring. But then we were also still able to connect with one another, even though it was through the screen. So shout out to Reham, because honestly, I honestly think that workshop did everyone that was able to be there, a lot of benefit for our mental health. Interestingly, I also have found that through Creatives of Color, art has been like, it's like a source of something else to work on, a reminder that we can still have creative ambitions and dreams during this time. So actually the sessions that have been the most popular with Creatives of Color have been about creative practice. So like Candy Bauer's session on storytelling was really well attended. There was, I don't know, more than 40 people came to that. and it was a 2-hour session on storytelling. We also have found that community care, like check-in sessions with other creative people of color, have been really helpful as well, where we literally just check in, how are you doing? And then we do a simple creative activity together. So we'll be doing another workshop on writing, creative writing with Michael Mohammed Ahmed from Sweatshop in Sydney at the end of this month. And then I also think art is how we are able to engage with a crisis, you know? And Rosie and I have been having multiple conversations about what is our responsibility, what is our role as non-Black people in supporting Black people, you know, during this time, whether it's First Nations people or or the Afro diaspora. So it's become a way of engaging with the crisis, you know. So we're really blessed to have Ornella Mutoni, who's going to do a session on healing towards self-preservation and Black joy next week, actually on Tuesday. And that, Rosie and I are not going to be part of that space because it's just for Black identifying folk. So yeah, and finally, I think my final point is, you know, it's been interesting because so much has moved online in terms of art. Some people might know one of my artworks is thechinesewhispers.com, which is a bilingual digital graphic novel inspired by the May 98 violence, especially towards Chinese Indonesian people. People have been reaching out to me because they've discovered that work in this period. And interestingly, there's Chinese Indonesian diaspora that have been reaching out to me and saying what I've been feeling actually, which is, like, I had a couple of people reach out to me from the US and from the UK, and they were like, the ones in the US was like, there's riots happening here, and it's reminding me of the riots that I lived through as a child during May 98. And I came up and I was starting to look into this, and I came across your work, you know, and thank you so much, because that work gave me the time, the opportunity to reflect. But I find that very interesting. And again, circling back to being in our bodies, this time has been very interesting in terms of what has been triggering for me because of, you know, living through May 98. But it turns out I'm not the only one that has been kind of like, oh, whoa, you know, living under state of emergency, whoa, seeing mass violence, what is that triggering in our bodies? And art has been really helpful in helping me, at least, to like try and be present with all the layers that this time is bringing up. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Rani, and thank you for adding those really personal contributions as well. And also thank you for flagging the upcoming events you have soon, because I'm sure, yeah, I hope that people will benefit from that. And I think I'll give everyone, all the panelists, a moment at the end as well to flag any resources or places where people can go to either support themselves as artists or support friends. Annette, would you like to add anything there?
Yeah, fascinating comments from both of you. Thank you. And especially for the reminder of that art is just a part of life, that there isn't necessarily anything different between art and activism or art and life, because art is an expression of life as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, I think in places like Australia, sometimes there's this sort of false barrier between the two, where the arts have become so professionalized or commodified that those of us who are not professional artists don't feel that we can express ourselves through art so much anymore. You've got to hide it, where in case the opposite is true. And I think that we find that now in times of crisis, that you need art as a way of expressing your fears and uncertainties. Right now, you know, by singing a song or dancing a dance or telling a story or whatever. And when you don't do it for yourself, perhaps you find someone else's work that does it for you, a piece of poetry that really hits home and helps you express what you're really feeling or wanting to say right now, or a song or a painting that really captures in something more than words what you're actually feeling. And so the value of the arts in all this cannot be overestimated. It's absolutely crucial. And even though a lot of people finding themselves out of work, at home, in isolation, and, you know, watching a lot of Netflix or whatever it is they're doing, I think they're seeking out more meaningful ways of trying to articulate what they're going through right now. And that's what art and artists can help us do. So I think that that's absolutely crucial. And I think, and I hope that maybe after being through this time when we have had to put a stop in our usual busy lives and get a chance to reflect on all this, that we might find more space again for the practice of art and the appreciation and utilization of art, of other people's arts within our own lives. And am I being too optimistic here?
Well, I'm gonna give you all an opportunity to be optimistic, actually, because I would like to hear just briefly before we do the Q&A about just maybe touch on your sort of hopes, or they don't need to be hopes, but predictions, I suppose, for developments that we might see in the art sector, either here or in Indonesia, and just, yeah, perhaps particularly what the sector wants to see from young emerging artists, or yeah, or maybe what the sector maybe requires of young artists at the moment. I'm happy for anyone to start.
If I could just briefly start, I think what's really been a very strong message through all of this is we're reminded about the power of working together rather than working solo. And I think certainly the practice of making art is not something you do on your own, even if in the end you're a person in a studio doing something by yourself. That's not what the whole art making process is. The art making process has started long before you get to that position of being in the studio to make that final artwork. It is all about the engagement and the lived experience that has happened up to that point, the information you've absorbed to get to that point. So to me, the power of working together and collaborating has become stronger than ever. And I hope that we don't lose that, because there's so much to gain in working together for a common goal. And particularly when, like, Arahmaiani is working with communities where you'll find inspiration, and you might even find an audience or a following that wasn't there before, simply by engaging with other people around you. And then the work itself becomes richer. So, you know, for me, that's the biggest takeaway of this period, is to try and not be the solo artist, but to work together with others.
Yeah, and actually, Annette, we've had a question come through that's for you, which I think is particularly pertinent to what you were just saying. The audience member said, "It's lovely to hear your commitment to building relationships with artists in Asia rather than choosing to show off the shelf in a shopping trip. I also commend your determination to showcase the work of more Asian Australian artists. I'm interested to know if you might also consider a long-term corner of the Australia Festival dedicated to young emerging artists from both Asia and Australia to network, share work in progress, and informally present their work to an interested public and more established artists."
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that. I think that would be fantastic to be able to help facilitate that. And that would start creating that relationship I'm talking about with emerging artists, not necessarily for us as the festival, but for the audience as well, to get engaged from an early point and then watch as they develop an idea or develop their practice. I think that would be exciting. How do we do it? I don't know, but yes, I would love to explore that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Buyani or Rani, would you like to touch on that idea around what the space? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sure. Because for me, it's not something new. I mean, I've been working with a group of young artists for a long time in Indonesia as well as abroad, right? And of course, sometimes I become like a senior who should give some, becoming like a consultant. Sure, why not, But I have been doing also collaboration with, for example, 2 years ago, I was collaborating with a young puppet master from Jogja. He was only 17 years old. And we were collaborating. And it was fantastic because I can learn also from him, this young so-called millennial generation. Maybe they have their own kind of, way of looking at things or vision, right? That I need to learn, I need to know, to understand. Besides, he also maybe can learn from this older generation, about what we have learned so far. So this is actually a really good idea, and I think now is the time for the younger generation to work together with older generation. Really, it is time. What I'm saying is, this time is the time for people to really hand in hand working together, because this problem, we already talked a little bit about that, is very serious. The impact will be really serious in our life. And we really have to work together, no matter what is generation you belong to. Really. Yeah. And also, no matter where you come from, what is your belief, we have to hand in hand work together, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and creativity, of course, is the key word.
Yeah.
And we don't need to give the meaning in a very limited kind of, sense. Creativity belong to everyone, right? And I'm, as an artist, it's like, okay, I have been given like huge space for exploring creativity, but actually it's not only me. Scientists, philosopher, and all people also, all kind of field of study, they also need creativity, right? This is also a good, exciting time that now we can really also learn from each other and exchange, right? And that old style of so-called specialization, will need to be reinterpreted. Do we really need to, have this little box and living in our small bubble? I don't think so.
That's such an excellent point, and we have a question that is also quite relevant to that point, Buyani. One of our participants asked, thank you for speaking about the symbiosis of art as activism. I'm wanting to know if you found the pandemic a suitable time to reach audience outside of that echo chamber, or have there been greater challenges? And if so, how have you overcome these challenges? I might pass to Rani to answer this one first.
I'm gonna share an observation about the Australian art sector. It's my hypothesis, just about echo chamber, because I don't know if some of you might have seen early on during the shutdowns, there was this hashtag Create Australia's Future campaign. Did anyone see that? Basically, people kept, like, it seemed like hundreds or thousands of people, I don't know, on social media were posting images of themselves at work doing a creative activity, and they used the hashtag Create Australia's Future. Now, I looked at, and they were trying to reach the Prime Minister Scott Morrison, as well as the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, and push for government stimulus package for the arts, which we're still waiting on. And I looked at that, all the flurry of activity in the echo chamber of social media, and I was just like, is this really the best way to reach those people? You know, are they really Facebook friends with you? And also, that's not how hashtags work on Facebook anyway. You know, Facebook doesn't aggregate based on hashtags. I mean, you might be able to use hashtags on Insta, on Twitter, but not on Facebook. What are you doing? And since then, I've been privileged enough to be part of the Democracy in Color Fellowship, which, you know, there are racial justice organizations specializing in campaigning and what is effective campaigning. And there I learned that there's such a thing as, well, firstly, there's such a thing as campaign strategy. So there's the deep level organizing, the kind of like long-term community organizing, a lot of what Rani and Annette actually has been doing for years. And then there's campaigning, which is time-bound, where you map out who are the people in positions of power, who do you want to influence, whose decision do you want to influence, and you choose a target, you know, and it's time-bound. You choose when you want to influence their decision, is there particular points in time you need to influence, who to mobilize, all that stuff. And anyway, through Democracy in Color, I've learned that there's such a thing as tactic-led campaigning, where you get enamored, or you get you think that just by doing a tactic, like a hashtag, that's going to lead to the change that you want to see. But actually, it turns out campaigning is really complex, and you have to be really targeted and know what the outcome is that you want. So I guess in response to that question, I'm kind of like, I think that's one of the challenges. You know, I think as young people if interested in the arts, and again, hang on, I'll finish what I said and then I'll backtrack. But I think as young people going into the arts, I think having some kind of awareness of campaigning strategies is really important, because I think it's a gap. I think it's a skills gap in the sector. And then also, I'm learning a lot about digital campaigning and email campaigning and digital fundraising. I think that's another strength that younger generations have, is that digital engagement, you know. Yeah, does that answer that question? It's something about echo chambers. So I guess I'm kind of saying that I saw this echo chamber in action in a time of crisis, when actually we really needed to reach out of that echo chamber.
Yeah, I think your contribution really adds to that broader conversation. I mean, yeah, there's no clear solution.
I don't know if I'm being too harsh. I don't know. Annette might have other insights, but yeah, that's my observations anyway.
Do you have other insights, Annette?
No, I thought that was really good. I thought that was a good example, and I agree with you that people posting pictures of themselves at work really didn't achieve a great deal, except it made those people themselves feel better and perhaps part of a bit of a community. But again, it was the echo chamber. We were talking to ourselves, and a lot of the time on social media, it becomes that. So if you're talking about activism and creating change, it's about reaching beyond that and helping people to think differently about an issue or an idea or a situation. And I think that requires something with a bit more effort than posting a photo of yourself, just using that example. And it does require meaningful engagement over a longer period of time. And it's meaningful to the person you're speaking with as well. Not just meaningful to yourself in your own situation, but to their situation. So it's a very complex thing if we're trying to create change. And I've found the only way I've been able to do it is to involve the people and encourage them to be part of that change. It's not about coming and doing something for you and then hoping you can just join in on it, but both of us together being part of making that change. It's the only way it can be effective.
May I say something?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to pass you. You have so much experience.
I just remember last October when I was in Melbourne, right? There was a presentation from one professor from, I think, Michigan University, but he's from Singapore. Sorry, I don't remember the name. but it's about the so-called interdisciplinary approach. Yeah, and then after that I discussed with PCA lecturer professors that they say to me, they told me that yes, Yani, this is what we are interested in, because this kind of method is not yet implemented in Australia. Yeah, and but they're really interested in it. Yes, and then oh, I said, yeah, sure, I understand, because I have been working on this kind of method and approach in Passau University in last 8 years. In Germany, it's called transdisciplinary approach. That's their term. But basically, it's like integrating, you know, science, philosophy, art, yeah. And this is, I mean, maybe we are talking on the level of theory now, but of course, this is also important to make people on that kind of institution supporting our idea. We're talking about collaborating and then, you know, working together. This is more like we are using common people language, right? But those who are in the institution, higher institution, they have their own kind of term and language for this kind of thing, right? I just want to remind myself as well. And oh yeah, that was what we discussed in Melbourne last year. So then now we are like, I'm like connected to Australia again, and it's like, yeah, yes, this is important. Yeah.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I just really want to give each of the speakers a very quick moment to point out any resources or discuss briefly any actionable takeaways that you think would be useful for our audiences, whether they are artists or non-artists.
Can I jump in there?
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say earlier, I think when we were talking about the, you know, talking to younger audiences and all that, and what this audience could take away. Again, I might be biased because I think I'm someone that's a little bit nerdy and I really like knowing the context and, you know, but I think it's really urgent to have some level of intersectional awareness. So all the stuff that Ibu Yani was talking about, the, you know, different disciplines. But I think, you know, that intersection between art and life, it feels really urgent actually to kind of, you know, talk about art, but also how art can serve food sovereignty and how that can serve financial and economic empowerment. Like how can all of that work together to serve communities feels really important and urgent right now. And I'm really drawn, you know, I draw inspiration from my Indonesian heritage, right? Because I'm mixed Peranakan Tionghoa and Javanese, and in my family, the art tradition is batik. We are batik artisans and also batik traders. So that art form is how my family have made a living, and some of them still do make a living for generations. And in Toraja, you know, the poetry, the carving, the dance, the music is part of everyday life and death rituals. So there's something that feels really urgent about also combining that with food sovereignty and economic empowerment. And then I also just want to share a few things that Theatre Network Australia are doing right now. And again, just to kind of give awareness of the bigger context in terms of performing arts in Australia. So at the moment, we're leading, Theatre Network Australia are leading and sharing conversations about how to reopen the sector. But we're really conscious that this is not about going back to normal, you know, and actually during this time, for some groups, for example, for people with disability, you know, some of this new world has actually been a lot more accessible than it has been before, you know. They've been able to access resources, people, knowledge, experiences without having to navigate inaccessible transport, crowds, or other barriers. So yeah, I feel like it's really important to have some kind of awareness of the work that peak bodies are doing as well in this space to try and advocate for better and safe conditions for artists. So yeah, in terms of resources, you can go to our website. So that's tna.org.au. And also in terms of Creatives of Color, you can follow us on Insta. So it's Creatives of Color AU. Maybe I'll put it in the chat as well.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And
Cool.
we've of course posted those links on CAUSINDY as well. So if you need to follow up anything that Rani, Annette, or Arahmaiani has said, you can probably find their website there.
I think the resources from Theatre Network Australia are fantastic. I think that's a great starting point. So they've been doing a really terrific job during all this. For me, I think the big takeaway, what I've loved is that, you know, artists will always be artists. The artistic drive cannot be stopped. And we've seen that. And we've seen people going online and just doing what they do because they have to do it, even though nobody's paying them to do it, but they still have to do it. It's their way of living in the world. We've seen people coming up with these fabulous ideas of the old drive-in theatres in Australia and using that as a way of presenting work. With social isolation, you just drive your car in and you experience a concert or whatever. So I think that the takeaway has been that we use our creativity to find the ways of doing what we need to do. Not just in creating the artwork, but finding the way in which we can deliver it. And I think I trust that this will develop new ways of doing things and new platforms. And I agree with Rani. It's like, let's not go back to the old ways. Let's not fall back into old habits. Let's take this as an opportunity to rethink and take a new perspective on how we do stuff from now on.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, Annette, that absolutely mirrors something that a friend of mine said sort of towards the start of the pandemic when the government were announcing all their stimulus packages, and as we know, there was nothing committed to the arts industry, and I was sort of lamenting that, and she said, you know, I haven't felt as shocked as I thought I would. The government has never really backed the arts. It's always been dire, and artists have always found ways to create and to persevere. So yeah, absolutely. Well, Yanni, do you want to add anything else?
Well, actually, I just want to actually give ideas to anybody who's interested that we will have the network and we will do the work together. As you know that I already have this community operating in Yogyakarta and also in Bali. And of course, Australia is neighboring country, very close. And we have a lot of things, you know, that we need to do together. So I would like to propose idea on, yeah, let's do the things together as soon as we can.
Where would be the best place for inspired members of our audience to reach you?
Oh, of course, I'm like moving around places, but you can always contact me through WhatsApp and Facebook and Messenger. It's not difficult, right? Yeah, but yeah, I will try to be spend more time in Indonesia, in Jogja and in Bali especially. And yeah, it's very close to Australia. So if you guys want to meet me somewhere over Bali or Jogja, yeah, I'm here.
Beautiful. Oh, goodness. Well, look, thank you so much to the three of you, to our wonderful panelists, and thank you to everyone that attended and asked questions and engaged today.
There's a question here, sorry.
Oh, there's a question.
That is for me, so I don't know, I haven't had a chance to.
Okay, yeah, well, very quickly, question for Rani. Thank you for sharing your thoughts about art and community development. Do you think that in this time of hardship, it is acceptable for an artist to be unproductive, or should they instead make the most of themselves as there is more spare time provided? And they also added a note that you met in Melbourne back in 2017.
Hello, Anissa. Yeah, and I think this is a really good point because a lot of what people have been saying to us during this time, across the board, actually, across my work, has been the impact on mental health and well-being. And so I think it is also really important to allow yourself time to not be productive, because it's really unkind to expect yourself to be productive during this time. I've definitely been finding it really hard to be productive. Like I do it, but it's been harder. So I think do what is good for your health and well-being, you know. And I think it's okay to not expect that you'll just keep going, actually, because you're a human being, you know, and you have bills to pay, presumably, you know, and you have a body to take care of, and spirit to nurture, and family to care for, and, you know, worry about possibly. And so, you know, I think it's really important for artists to be treated as the full human beings that we are. And we're not always going to be productive, you know, and that's a capitalist myth anyway. So, you know, it's the worst time to buy into that myth anyway, because it's collapsing. So, you know, let's not keep going. Oh my God. So yeah, it's again, it's been part of the conversations across all of my work. It's like, how do we make time for rest? How do we properly resource people's need for mental health support? So please take care. You know, it's a really urgent time to take care of yourself and others, but start by taking care of yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Well, I think we might leave it there for today, but the work by no means ends when this talk does. And just thank you again. I'm sure everyone has taken away some really important wisdom and also some actionable takeaways as well. So thank you very much.
Makasih Mira, Doni, Kak Cindy, makasih Bu Yani, makasih Annette.